Today I want to talk briefly about the principles of trauma at the generic level, for those of you who might not be familiar with it. And this is something that is not obvious because that's not the way that, in my experience, a lot of this stuff is approached in traditional psychotherapy. Even though a lot of these aspects, yes, of course, they are explored, the process, the way things are approached, and the therapeutic work that is done in traditional psychotherapy is not really based on this foundation. So the number one idea and the number one concept is that to heal from trauma, you need to go through trauma. And it's unfortunate, it's shit if you want, but that's really how it works. What does that mean? Well, it means different things. One is doing the shadow work. What does it mean to do the shadow work? It means to staying with the part of you that are in pain. Another aspect, which is basically the same, just the other side of this, the other side of the coin, is to feeling your emotions. Ideally observing your emotions, so not repressing them, but not being swallowed and consumed by them. It's pretty hard, but it's fundamental and it's super key to healing. And if you need to pick, if you really can't, because obviously it's like a clock, it's like a stick that sometimes goes one way or another. It's better to basically, if you have to be swallowed by them, be swallowed by them, because it's better than the opposite, than the alternative, which is to repress them. If you repress them, there is no chance. If you allow them to come up and they are extreme, because trauma was extreme, you'll be swallowed by them. But probably there will be a part of you that knows what's happening, even if at the deep level. And in that way, anyways, you're feeling them. And that's like the most difficult bit, right? That's the most difficult bit in the healing journey, which is to basically allowing yourself to feel extreme emotions. They probably extreme because that's what trauma is. Like, that's the definition of trauma. It's like a shock or something that happened to us that we weren't able to process. And the trauma I speak about is childhood trauma. So obviously when you're kids, we don't have all the resources that we have as adults, and so shocks to our system are impossible to process at the time. We are adults now, so we can heal and process that stuff. And yes, it's much better to allow those emotions to come up, no matter how intense they are. And the trick is to observe and stay with them and hold them and allow ourselves to see them before they go on, before we let go, without being consumed. But if you can't, and it's really hard to do, then it's better to feel those emotions, even though you are temporarily swallowed by them, than the opposite, which is to repress them. Because repressing them will lead to either toxic behavior and toxic stuff, or just a lot of tension and anxiety. And the number one thing that this leads to is depression. Depression is a feeling of powerlessness, and it's the feeling that we are into when we are not allowing tough emotions to emerge. And believe me, no matter how intense they are, no matter how horrible they are, there is an enormous probability that will be better than whatever feeling, because it's not really a feeling, but whatever the way you feel you are in when you are depressed. So basically there are two steps in practical terms for this. Well, practical terms, theoretical and practical terms. Number one is to allow yourself to be vulnerable to yourself. The key word here is vulnerability. So allow yourself to be vulnerable with yourself. Not telling yourself stories about how strong you are and how unlucky you are or how bad things are, but it's your fault because, and getting into that chit chat, it leads nowhere, but allowing yourself to feel the emotions that are inside you. Be vulnerable with yourself. Embrace those parts that are in the shadow, because they are in pain. They're not in the shadow. Maybe you don't like them, maybe you are scared by them, but chances are you love them really a lot. And if you do, it is precisely that love that will heal them. So when you're not allowing your shadow self, like the part of you that is in pain, to come up, to be visible, to be felt by you, when you're not allowing yourself to be vulnerable with yourself, you're abandoning yourself. And chances are you deeply love yourself, all of yourself, and you don't want to abandon yourself. And step 2 is allowing yourself to be vulnerable with others. That means allow a close friend, a family member, if your trauma is not from your direct family, so your family is actually a trusted space, or a therapist. And that's why therapy is the solution to this problem. It depends on the type of therapy, and we'll talk about that in other videos. So allow those trusted, close people that love you to see the parts of you that are in pain. This can be extremely soothing. Then there is a step 3 and step 4, but for now, those are the initial key components from moving out of the denial stage into the healing journey. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you soon. Ciao.